Welcome to Mystara for a delve into one of the most popular nations in all of the known world, Glantry. The third nation released in the Gazetteer line, and without a doubt the most dysfunctional. Glantry follows the old writer's mantras. If you want to make something memorable, make it flawed. Start with a bunch of racist wizards, throw in ethnic strife, political tension, xenophobia, secret societies, hidden magics, and egregious magical OSHA violations, and you've got Glantry. The only people they hate more than each other is everybody else. I'm Mr. Welch, and today we're looking at the love child of Hogwarts and Yugoslavia, the Principalities of Glantry. Glantry was written in 1987 by Bruce Hurd, the editor of Mystara himself. He insisted that the book needed to be 96 pages instead of the then standard 64 pages, which TSR allowed. This size increase would become the standard for future gazetteers, though Irendi would go back to the 64-page format briefly. The book wasn't divided into a players and DM section, something that would be later changed in future versions. The cover was done by Clyde Caldwell, of course, as he did all the gazetteer cover art. For a change, at least two of the characters on the cover actually appear in the book, Princess Brannock McGregor and Jarek Veriana. Though I'm not sure why Veriana has cat eyes. Not sure who the red-headed wizard is supposed to be either. The basic breakdown of Glantry is it's ruled by wizards and wizards alone. Clerical magic in the nation is punishable by death. Being resistant to arcane magic is punishable by death. Possessing unknown forms of magic is typically punishable by death. Attempting to spread any form of religion is punishable by death. Practicing dark magics like necromancy or witchcraft is perfectly legal, and they have their own lobbying groups to help encourage their forms of magic. Glantry has its own priorities, and other nations can't even begin to comprehend them. Glantrians have a long-established bias towards all things arcane. In their formative years, the wizards decided that only magic users should rule, so all the fighters and thieves had to contend with being second-class citizens. Since arcane magic was obviously superior to divine magic, the worship of immortals was banned nationwide. Actual clerics, when captured, are tortured to death as a lesson to other religions that Glantry's official religion is atheism. This makes them no friends among the more religious nations like Yalarum and Ethengar, and not that the Glantrians care. Race relations are even worse than international relations. Elves are welcome in Glantry, as they can cast spells. Dwarves, on the other hand, are resistant to magic, and that infuriates the Glantrian wizards. Nothing that restricts the supremacy of arcane spells is tolerated. Because of this, dwarves found in the borders of Glantry are often captured and dissected to try to understand their magical resistance. Likewise, the Hen of the Shires, with their magic warping denial powers, are hunted down by Glantrian wizards to discover their secrets on some dissection table. Gnomes are tolerated because of their arcane abilities, but distrusted because of their association with dwarves. The Glantrians avoid the Sidhe, despite their obvious magical origins. While a Glantrian wizard might be curious how the Sidhe generate their own spells naturally, the thought of waking up to an enraged reality-warping 10-foot-tall archfey with green plate mail armor and pressing questions regarding your poor choice of scientific subjects is more than enough to satisfy most wizards' curiosity. With their intolerance of non-magic-using races and their almost psychotic hatred of clerics, Glantry doesn't have a lot of friends. Okay, they've got Darrican, because Darrican's everybody's friend. Despite ties to both Alphatia and Theatis, tensions between the empires are strained at best. Alfheim has cultural ties to Glantry, but doesn't trust them at all for fear of the constant feuding between the two elven princesses that are spilling into their nation. Karamikos has exchanged ambassadors, but the nations are too distant to have much more than diplomatic ties. Apart from that, every nation is either too distant to Glantry to deal with them in any meaningful way, or just outright hates them. Glantry's list of enemies includes Yalarum, Ethengar, Rockholm, the Five Shires. Even the city of Serene won't go near them because of the machinations of their princes. Geographically, the nation is located in a heavy mountainous region in the northwestern part of the known world. Glantry shares a small border with Darrican and Ethengar, and a larger border with the Broken Lands. All access to the nation is through heavily defended mountain passes featuring numerous forts. These forts, along with the various wizards that are going to be stationed there, make any frontal assaults on the nation unfeasible. Ethengar might want to see the wizards burn, but every attack they've launched into the Principalities have been repulsed with great losses. The reverse is true for Glantrians, as their sorties into Ethengar have always met defeat, because the superior numbers of the horse nomads easily enveloped Glantrian expeditions on the wide open steppes. Because of their lack of contact with outside nations and limited access to their neighbors, in that aspect alone, Glantry is reminiscent of a fantasy Switzerland, if Switzerland was populated by a bunch of xenophobic pricks. There are 10 principalities in Glantry at 1000 AC, and they couldn't be further apart politically. Each principality is run by a noble house, and those are filled with internal politics and backstabbing, in some cases quite literally. House Silaire runs New Averon, which is led by Etienne d'Amberville, the same Etienne d'Amberville from Castle Amber, though he was Stephen Amber in that module, they just translated it into French. This noble house arrived from another world, which was an alternate Earth, complete with fantasy France. Since fantasy France was burning witches and wizards at the stake, Etienne took his family and a large number of his subjects and headed through a gate to Mystara. House Silaire is possibly the most screwed up of all the noble houses, as Etienne isn't dying fast enough for his relatives. Couple this with the fact that most of his immediate family are more than slightly off their meds, and you've got a wonderful mix of intrigue. Throw in secret werewolves and secret cabals, and you've got a potential for some really messed up adventures. House Crown Guard of Glantri represents Scotland in the known world, and I mean actual fantasy Scotland, not some knockoff Scotland. Real, transdimensional, radioactive necromancing Glaswegians. Prince Bernard MacGregor comes from the same world as the d'Amberville family, and brought his family across using the same gates House Silaire did. Crown Guard is not a nice place to live. It's filled with haunted moors, unruly ghosts, and traditional Scottish food. The Crown Guard nobility is famous for their necromancy, and the commoners hate them for it. The problem is the nobles have lots of magic and undead monstrosities to counter any potential revolt. I would like to thank David McGregor for helping me with my brogue all those years ago, because he wanted to sound like me and I wanted to sound like him when we were growing up, so he taught me how to talk like a Scotsman. Of course, it's easy to learn a new dialect when you're like 5 years old, but the best part right now is David McGregor is walking around the streets of Aberdeen going, "Hey y'all, how y'all doing?" The other undead-related house in Glantry is House Igorov in Moldavia. Think Strahd, only without the massive amount of support material or his own personal setting. Prince Morfell Gorovich Waslani might be considered discount Strahd, but in his defense he has a lot fewer waifus. Moldavia is Transylvania with only half the serial numbers filed off. The people live in fear of their vampire nobility, undead roam the forests, and all sorts of fell creatures stalk the unwary. But then again, there's no one complaining about the placement of prosthetics legs and artwork in Moldavia. House Linden of Berghoven is where the Flemish lived. Led by Vansari Vlardoen, who is generally regarded as a bit of a jackhole, the Flemish were the original settlers of Glantry back when it was called the Highlands. Because of this bit of history, the Flemish believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of Glantry and constantly remind their fellow countrymen of this fact, causing the people to be generally regarded as a bunch of jackholes. The Flemish love fire. They are one of the three major factions of fire wizards in Mystara, representing the neutral alignment compared to Irindi's good faction and Alphatia's evil faction. They're also one of the most despised houses as they have a beef against pretty much everybody, and they control enough of the nobility to remain a force politically. House Ritterberg of Alban represents Germany in Mystara, and the house is led by the militaristic Jager von Drachenfels. House Ritterberg was created by a marriage between nobles from Alphatian and Thaetian families, causing the house to be racked with numerous internal conflicts. As the Drachenfels name suggests, the house loves dragons. They love to hunt them. They put dragons all over their architecture and their clothing. Draconic research is a common profession in Alban. Alban's biggest rivals in Glantry are houses Silverstone and Sorechia, who are of pure Alphatian and Thaetian stock, respectively. But while Prince Jager has control of the army, there's nothing they can do about it. House Silverstone of Blackhill is led by Volospin Andir, a pure-blooded Alphatian. The Andirs arrived in Glantry when Alphatia was trying to seize Glantry for itself. But when that went south, the family claimed a portion of the nation for themselves. They're long on pride, but short on allies, as everyone assumes that they're loyal to Alphatia more than they are to Glantry. The fact that Prince Volospin has proved himself to be quite treacherous hasn't helped their popularity at all. House Singabad of Krondahar consists of a breakaway clan of Ethengarian descent. Prince Jarek Viriana IV has a death sentence in Ethengar, but that doesn't prevent other princes from considering him loyal to Ethengar first. The region is relatively poor, but strategically important, as the entrance to the Ethengar. The various nobles of Singabad are magically sworn to be loyal to Glantry for 7 generations, though no one knows the effects of the curse, as no Singabad noble has ever violated the oath. The people are torn between the Ethengar that hate them as traitors and their countrymen who despise them for being potential spies. House Sorechia of Corrins is a nice place to visit, but you certainly don't want to live there, and even visiting it can be very hazardous to your health. Inaceti de Malapetria is of Phaeacian stock, and is known for being a paranoid psychotic. Paranoia is a common trait in Corrin's nobility, as death by poison is the leading cause of demise in the region. De Malapetria has risen to the leadership of his house by being the most paranoid of all. The house is considered spies for the Phaeacians, but their prince rarely passes on secrets, believing all of Thyatis too stupid to understand the magical secrets that he possesses. Clan Alhambra of Belcadiz is the first of the 2 elven clans found in Glantry. Led by the fiery Carnelia de Fedoras de Belcadiz, the entire clan of elves is pretty much fantasy Zorro. Belcadiz elves are known for being shorter than other elves by several inches, and are willing to duel at the drop of a hat. The elves are hot-blooded to the extreme, and they allow no slight to go unpunished. They also cause a fair amount of continuity snarls, as they're obviously Spanish, but they came from the south, while the Spanish-themed nations of the Savage Coast supposedly came from Thyatis, which doesn't even have a Spanish-themed area. There's a lot of different headcanon explaining this, but I'm not going to go into that here. Last of the houses of Glantry, but not the least, is Clan Elorivan of Erawan, led by Carlotina Erawan. These elves are traditional Sylvan elves with ties to Alfheim. Princess Erewhon is one of the few truly good people in Glantry, even if she does play their deadly politics. Like other princes with ties to outside nations, she's considered a spy for Alfheim and distrusted by the other houses. She's also disliked because she has managed to get the right to maintain the forest on the eastern edge of Glantry, which allows her to control the supply of lumber into the nation, which is a vital resource. One of Glantry's biggest problems is the various princes hate each other for a laundry list of reasons. On their list of allies and enemies, the ally list is typically one specific noble or another, while the enemies list is an entire house, usually several. The political infighting makes for getting anything passed in Parliament almost impossible due to the rivalries. Only an outside threat can unify the princes, which they will do almost immediately. Glantry is the only nation in Mystara that allows the free research of magics forbidden anywhere else. All of the wizards need Glantry, because they can't go anywhere else to do their research and test their magics. However, once the threat is dealt with, the houses will fall right back into their infighting and their treachery. Piling on the absolute mess of Glantry's internal politics is the staggering list of secret societies found within its borders. Numerous terrorist organizations look to bring down either specific houses or various nobles, like the Moldavian Liberation Organization, Order of the Claymore, or the Elven Liberation Front. Various criminal guilds, like the Fellowship of the Pouch or the Sisters of the Private Houses, have become semi-legitimate by unionizing, paying taxes, and more importantly, offering discounts to important members of Parliament. To gain power in Glantry, you need either magic or contacts. To gain a lot of power, you need both. Of course, if you're talking Glantry, you're talking magic, and Glantrians have more magic in their day-to-day lives than pretty much any nation. Not just in Mystara, I'm talking across the multiverse. If a spell can make your life easier, there's a magic item sold that can cast it. Glantry doesn't have magic shops, it has magic department stores. Various wizards spend their entire lives cranking out minor magic items, and the Alchemist Guild brews potions by the barrel. Continual light spells have replaced street lights. Wizards race to create new spells to make available to the public because new scrolls sell out within hours. Behind the public displays of arcane prowess, Glantrians seek out new sources of arcane power. The secret crafts are new approaches and schools of magic that are unknown outside the nation, and poorly kept secrets among the nobility. The crafts are new forms of necromancy, illusion, and conjuration, and all new schools like cryptomancy or witchcraft. They aren't fully understood just yet, and practicing them can be dangerous to wizards just starting their research into them. The crafts can ultimately lead to passive immortality, but more often will just lead to the wizard's laboratory vaporizing in arcane fire. The biggest secret Glantry has is the radiance. This is a magical radiation leaking from an artifact located miles below Glantry City. Few know of this magical power, and those that do guard it with a murderous intent. The radiance enhances magic like nothing else. Channeling the rad as it is known by its practitioners can supercharge spells and rewrite the fate of its users. At the highest level, the spell can elevate a wizard to an immortal, though it's quite dangerous, and failure results in a fate worse than death. The wizards that use the radiance excessively take on a large number of risks. First, Glantrian wizards are always looking for a new source of magic. If you reveal one they are unaware of, they will more than likely try to take the knowledge from you. More than a few radiance users languish in dungeons where they are tortured for information. The more physical threat is the radiance warps a wizard's body. The more it is used, the greater the chance part of the wizard's body shrivels into a useless husk. Too much exposure to the radiance causes the wizard to become an undead lich, though one with unheard of magical powers. Glantry's capital is known for being the city of gondolas, as it resembles real-life Venice, only high in the mountains. It's actually the only city detailed in any meaningful way in any of the books dedicated to Glantry. The city contains a parliament, as well as the Great School of Magic and most other important government buildings. The school is the most famous building in all of Glantry. Almost every wizard of any note is trained there. New low-level spells are created there on a daily basis, and the school funds itself by selling the magic items students create as part of their lessons. More experienced wizards use the school's faculties for their own magical research, which means even the school is dominated by the politics the nation is famous for. So how did a nation that is almost dysfunctional beyond belief with its internal politics and divisiveness, as well as hated by most of its neighbors, come to be? Piece by piece. After the fallout from the Great Rain of Fire was dying down, some elves found what would be the future setting of Glantry. And there they found an item left over by Blackmore, and of course they had to push all the buttons. Later, after the fallout from that device died down long enough for people to live in the area, the Flamish showed up after being chased out of the world the Alphatians would later flee from as well. The Flame founded the city of Brazier and sat back bragging about how much better they are compared to everyone else. After 300 years of hogging all the cool magic for themselves, the Flames are disgusted when the elves show back up in their country, having returned to the land they originally claimed for their own. Settlers from Trollodara and Thyatis also show up because of rumors of secret magics in the area. The Flames attack and defeat the elves and settlers and drive them south. There, the refugees are rescued by an Alphatian force who has also heard about this magic land, and with the Alphatians' help, the coalition defeats the Flamish army that was chasing them. The Alphatian wizard Halzenthraum leads the new army, and he divides the nation into 3 territories, one for the elves, one for the settlers, and one for the Flames. And then he seizes the entire nation for Alphatia anyways. Dwarves show up to mine the mountains, regardless of what the Proto-Glantrians think. A plague hits the region, but the dwarves are resistant to it, because they're dwarves. The Glantrians blame the dwarves for the plague, and open war breaks out. During this time, Alexander Glantry of the Phaeacian settlers ambushes Halzenthram and liberates Glantry from the Alphatians. About a decade after this, the wizards of Glantry realize that they're in most of the positions of power and decide to declare only wizards can be nobles. Actual wizards, not bards, not sorcerers, not warlocks, or anybody else that can cast arcane magic. War breaks out between the wizards and the rest of the non-wizard nobles, which results in complete victory for the wizards. After that, other wizarding types begin to migrate openly to Glantry. The Belcadese elves arrive from someplace far to the south. The French and the Scottish show up from the portals to another world and claim part of the nation. Land is granted to the various wizards. With the more powerful the wizard, the more important the title. When a title is made available or abandoned, another wizard is promoted and leaves behind their old domain, allowing for the old title to be filled by a lower-ranking wizard. It gets complicated, and it is one of the biggest sources of backstabbing between the nobles. Glantry is a very complicated nation, with dozens of NPCs detailed, but surprisingly no cities outside the capital. The nation already has multiple languages exclusive to its borders, which just adds to the contentious politics between the regions. Everything about Glantry's inner workings just divides the nation even more. The Phaeacians and Alphatians hold grudges from their old empires, and hate the mixed-race Albans even more. The 2 elf clans fight over what forest Glantry has. The French and the Scots have ancient grudges, and everybody hates the Flame, which is fine because they hate them back. So why do you want to play a Glantrian? They're one of the most divided people in all of D&D. Glantrians make the citizens of Sigil look unified. They're known for being racist, and their love of vivisection makes them no friends. However, when it comes to variety, nobody comes close to the Wizards of Glantry. The nation churns out adventures faster than Disney burns out child stars. If you want to play a wizard, nobody does magic better than Glantry. Players wanting to try a unique culture have 10 to choose from just within Glantry's borders. There's a reason this book is considered one of the best nation books TSR ever produced. And now it's time to continue with the remasters. Next up is the island nation of Irindi, considered one of the worst of the gazetteers, as the pop cultural references didn't stand the test of time, and the book didn't go into a lot of detail about things people wanted to hear about. So that's the next nation that's going to get tuned up and fixed. But until then, kiss me, baby. Let the fire get higher.